panel.
Thank you very much, Anna. So we go straight to the panel, and during the election campaign and the period leading to it, and we've heard that social media is the most used channel to channel out fake news. If you could just kindly tell us what you encountered real time, and what safeguards you had in place, and how you navigated that.
Thank you so much, Eric. Unfortunately, you decided to start with me. I think I've been part of the elections for quite some time. I was there in 2017 and also in 2022. And I think as you started talking about the issue of Taifa Leo in Nation, it was in 2017. And actually it led to the loss of Otuoma then contesting for governor. But I think this is something that has been going on, and it's a new norm that we have to accept that it's part and parcel of media now. That the social media aspect of it, because of the citizen journalist, and we talk about everybody being a journalist based on how many people follow you, you are able to actually post information. For us in the newsroom, and especially the legacy media, the media houses are putting in place the fact check. We always say that when you get the information, try and check the website where it is coming from, or the sites, the social media sites, are they verified, and go forward and even call the person to be able to verify the information you get. Most of the time you find that, like Nation, we used to have the social media platforms, you find exactly maybe a poster depicting information from Nation, which is not true. So for us at Nation, what we do is that we stamp it fake, but we make it blur, so that the initial information that was posted, nobody is able to read it, but we have posted fake, so that we don't allow people to continue sharing the same information. So first, we have a team that reacts very fast to that. The other thing is that you also look out to the various platforms and see what exactly is being shared outside there. And also you use your journalists themselves, because sometimes again in the groups, it is us who are the ambassadors to other people. During election time, I think it was worse, because one, again, you find that politics is intertwined. You find in a way that even journalists, because of the sources you have, you believe your sources. But sometimes you know the intention of sources. They will give you information for their own selfish interest, which might not be true, or it might be true. So as a journalist, you find yourself in a very delicate situation. How do you verify information? And that requires that you don't rely on one source. So that when you get information, you are able to double check with another source and another source to be able to know this information I'm getting, is it the true information? In terms of even the people who handle the stakeholders who handle elections, you need to have the people who manage elections. If it is IBC, you just don't take what IBC gives you, but you also ask other stakeholders. How do we verify this information? You can use Parliament, you can use the civil societies, you can use the information you have, you can use the laws yourself, because sometimes somebody will even refer to a law that doesn't exist. So you as a journalist, you really just go play with it because a source has told you. So again, that makes you read more. And then I think the partnership that came out again between the media houses, I think the Kenya Media Sector Working Group did a good job, and also the various organizations, that we were able to have the regular trainings, the regular meetings, to actually meet these stakeholders and build the relationship that we had with them. Thank you.
Ken, you're next. As somebody who has been there and had a bird's eye view of things, managing content generation through various platforms, and with the cutthroat competition that is the Kenyan media, and with fake news coming from social media quickly, and you want to catch up with them. You want to beat them with your social media feeds, and also find its way into radio, TV, and the print the following day. How do you navigate that with the cutthroat competition that is the Kenyan media?
Okay, thanks, Eric. And what's interesting is that, first of all, I want to appreciate that study by Churchill. Churchill, you brought out very, very salient points, and that speaks very, very closely to what this is disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. Because, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we exist in the new dynamic is the technology that has come. The intensity of misinformation has always been part of it. The only difference is that now technology has made it faster and available to very many other people. And as a result of that, what happens is, first, there is the dynamic that our politics is ideologist. It is personality based. So what has happened is that last year, in that particular reference to last year's election, it was the most intensely trained. Journalists were very well trained. The shock is that at the end of it, it was also the most affected by misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. So the question comes in, what happened to the trainings? Did people take the trainings very supervision, or where did we miss the point? Because that's one of the things that we need to look at. As Roslyn has just mentioned, that news organizations were all trained on what to do and given the tools and what to do it. But one thing that we have to recognize that the new dynamic, the competition that we are looking at social media and other aspects that make misinformation and malinformation and disinformation a real challenge to us is the fact that we now have to deal with the fact that do we even have the capacity in the newsrooms? That is one of the things. We are in an environment where we have the most degraded kind of newsrooms, and we are trying to catch up. So that in itself has not worked very well. Two, there is also the element that the age-old phenomenon of school died. So that little minute to wait and verify information was very, very important, because you have to give it right. The other third dynamic that came through, what Ross alluded to, is now we have what we call audience fast. Everybody is a journalist, collecting information, and they have the tools of dissemination, collection, and replication is real. So who do you stop? On the positive point, the free flow of information is part of that democracy that we want to see. People need to know. But that is the point where everybody is. Those people who want to manipulate information and content, move in to try and change things. And the other fourth dynamic that I want to mention that was really different in the last election was, for the first time, politicians and the parties were able to employ our own media professionals, people who know how the newsrooms operate. So there was at some point what appeared like civil war between the guys who are out and the guys who are in. So that competition, who gets it fast. So it was easy. People acknowledged to manipulate the ecosystem. And these are the things, but one thing that I know that if you step a little back and train your people well and equip them and set up the desks, that's what you do. And what we do, and then at a personal level, there is that one element of integrity. Do you, the person you send out? There's something that came up in 2017 that I remember, the debate about how we used to embed journalists so that they have knowledge about certain ecosystems. At some point, I was saying, when do they transit from being embedded to being embedded journalists? So that became an issue of personal integrity and the ecosystem. But what I would say that there's more information, but how to handle that hygiene, and that hygiene of that information, that means that we have to be deliberate in the way we do, use the tools that are available, use the knowledge, and do what is right. And nobody is copying anybody. We all have that information, and you trust that we are saying, the institution is trusted, people still come to you. Because even social media, after people read social media, they still go back to the legacy media and say, what did the legacy media say? Because the legacy media is actually the verifier of everybody. They read it, but they want to verify that that information is true. Thank you.
Thanks. Victor, you are in the ICT sector, and we've seen the evolution of the information communication technology moving faster than even government and regulatory authorities are able to catch up. If you could just give us the Kenyan situation first of all, and from our topic today, give us some insights what would have happened, what would have done.
Thank you. A couple of things. People have been lying from time immemorial. It's part of society. It's part of culture. And I think in Kenya we have excelled at it, because to address disinfo from someone, perhaps we might find it useful for our purposes. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he said, we know that they are lying, they know that they are lying, they even know that we know that they are lying. We also know that they know we know they are lying too. They of course know that we are certainly that we certainly know that they know we know they are lying too as well. But they are still lying. In our country, the lie has become not just a moral category, but the pillar industry of this country. I think I can stop there. But anyway, we have tried to legislate to try and deal with lying, but we can't force people to tell the truth. Kenya developed the Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Law in 2018, which punishes the publication of false information and also the making of false publications. Before that, we had the Kenya Information and Communication Act, which had the controversial Section 29, which talked about the misuse of telecommunication devices. Fortunately, that law that provision was declared unconstitutional. And of course, it was used to target journalists, and so we also seen that trend. We have our defamation laws, which of course protect people spreading wrong information that attack or affect the character of a person or lowers their reputation in the eyes of right-thinking members of society. So in terms of frameworks, we also have the media laws, which regulate the journalists and also require, we have the standards of the code of conduct, which puts standards around, ethical practice and professional integrity of, media professionals. So in terms of legal framework, we do have a robust legal framework, which to some extent remains problematic, especially the computer misuse law, in the sense of the very punitive way that it attempts to deal with people who spread information, especially because the implementation of the law is not always to address the disinformation practice, but usually to punish people who are critical of government. And we did see this, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, when people were exposing information about the pandemic, and these laws were used against them. So I think regulation is there, but there's problems in terms of its implementation and enforcement. But I think more importantly, we need to address the root causes of disinformation in Kenya. We know that there are about 4 or 5 major also financial related information. Reported as received, where journalists do not go forward other than what they have received from politicians and publish it as is. We also see a lot of the he say, she say kind of reporting where, President Ruto said, and that in our country, the biggest conveyors or the biggest industry of disinformation is in the political space. And it's very difficult to hold them accountable because one, they're the ones who are in power, two, they're the ones who are making these laws. And three, we have a public that has a very low level of awareness in terms of how to fact check information, and media literacy is also low. So in as much as we have a legal framework, politicians who are funding and even recruiting, as you say, professional journalists to aid the disinformation and propaganda machinery, and it's difficult to hold them accountable because the oversight bodies that perhaps could deal with them, one, are not aware that that these are actually offences. Number two, they see DCI and the police have been used for political purposes. So the political interference in terms of criminal law enforcement independently tackle these offences. And we've also seen that how some of these offences are checked and where is disinformation there. Where are the sources of information? Because we have our media industry that we can rely on to provide factual information still hasn't risen to that elevated role of providing independent fact-checked information that even law enforcement authorities can rely on as evidence and say that, you said this, but this is actually what happened. So other people who are in the information economy can have factual and credible news in order to fight the culture and corruption that actually exists within society, because those are actually the key drivers of disinformation.
Thank you so much. Alan, I know you've done some work on the need for media to have written or at least documented editorial policy guidelines. And I want to link that up with the recommendation that that media come up with certain policies during elections. It used to be the practice. Last year, I'm not sure I saw, maybe I missed something, but I'm not sure, because the media used to publish a sort of a pact with our audiences that will not allow this kind of content, will throw out this kind of advertising if it doesn't meet our standards and all that. Now, given the diverse nature of Kenyan media ownership, speak to that, and in view of the need for media to have written editorial policy guidelines to shape coverage, especially of contested spaces like elections.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I'd like to just jump into the discussion that was going on before the mic came to me. So we found that as we were doing our study that what has been mentioned before, that the more misinformation and disinformation and malinformation goes up there, the more people rely on the mainstream media to confirm. Because Kenya has a very robust mainstream media. It could be dominated by a few players, but there's still the trust level in Kenya is still higher compared to the rest of the world. So as much as we see a rise of misinformation, people always go back to the mainstream media to confirm that indeed what they're reading on their WhatsApp or what they're seeing on their Twitter or X now or on Facebook is indeed actually true. So if we had robust fact-checking desks in newsrooms, then I think we'd be way ahead in combating misinformation and disinformation. Yeah. So now I'll also want to add something that was said by the previous speaker, and I'll just try to expand it a bit to. He spoke about media literacy, and in one of the forums such as this we had before, the need for media literacy was also stressed upon, which speaks to what our study was based on, that if the public had no information of how journalism was done, then they'd actually be more empathetic when mistakes are made, or they'd understand how a certain conclusion or a certain decision was made in the newsroom. So Kenya, this now goes to speak to the internet penetration. Kenya has one of the highest internet penetration rates in Africa, and that also follows with the mobile phone use. So the smartphones. And you see, these two things came together very quickly. So even the Nyanya Ukoko Kijiji, who may not necessarily have and this was spoken to before, the ability to discern what's fake from what's real, now suddenly has access to social media and they can see all this information coming to them. And they don't necessarily have the knowledge to know how to discern what's fake and what's real. So I think that's just stressing the need to have some media literacy and also digital literacy, just to have the ordinary folks, some of those basically people who have not necessarily been in any classroom or any formal education, so that they can tell that what you're reading, this could be fake because of such and such a reason, and it could be true because of such and such a reason. I think also need to be more aware that once you read something that sounds that it could not be true, it sounds too ridiculous, then you can rely on the mainstream media to go just and to confirm, to confirm what you're reading. So I think I've spoken myself out of forgetting what you really asked, but I'll just go on. So when we were doing our study, we looked at some of the terms that are commonly used to rubbish the media. I think you might know how President Uhuru used to say gazeti za kufunga nyama, and then there was the term githeri media. So we looked at how the term githeri media was used across social media for a couple number of years, and we especially targeted when the campaigns in Kenya started to when they ended, I think to around October, and we saw that there was a spike in the references of the term githeri media on Facebook and on Twitter. And once we identified the instances which led to these spikes, we found that politicians were really at the center of it. Most of it started with politicians that then twitched to organically, or maybe not organically, if not share to the ordinary users like you and me. But then when we went further to look at what really made this politician say, ignore this githeri media, or this is just typical githeri media behavior, we found that there were sometimes innocent mistake, maybe something was not really verified to the degree that it was supposed to be verified, so they got one detail wrong. And this one detail, on an otherwise very factual story, ends up just being the basis for an entire investigative reporting or a very informative news piece being dismissed. So I guess now, to close what I'm trying to say is, just going back to the point that we might have policies that say, this is how we do our fact checking. For every story that goes out, you have to talk to person A, who give you an independent analysis, but you still need to know that the facts of the story are correct. Because if you just get one detail wrong, you end up maybe just a story that was meant to be very informative ends up being just one of the reasons why media gets attacked, and which now then goes back to the day we're celebrating today. Thank you.
Okay, I guess the thing there is for media to be robust in the way. I'll open it up for 3-4 questions from the panel, from the floor, and we'll take the. So we need a regulatory framework so that purveyors of fake news, disinformation, and any of that recommendation is adopted from SecGen. There is a journalist in Baringo who is wanted for maybe what somebody thinks is inaccurate reporting. So how do you regulate, hold accountable, and punish misreporting, but at the same time answer that question? If you don't volunteer, I'll pick. Yes, please.
But the approach to regulation needs to be very precise, in as much as the law is not a tool of mathematical precision. But when we have the way our law is currently drafted, it leaves a lot of room for subjective interpretation of a certain story or a certain incident. By the arresting wide, then that person can be prosecuted. So I think there is need to bring the law to be, the provisions to be very, very precise, so that it is very clear to anybody what the offense is. Because if the offense is not clear or it leaves room for interpretation, then it means that itashika waliokuwemo na wasiokuwemo. Secondly is to work on the professional standards and self-regulation. Guidelines and trainings for media practitioners, journalists are very important so that then they are also, when they go beyond that, cause harm in society. So because the law ideally should be developed to prevent harm, and if the publication presents that risk of harm, then that's when you should apply. But if if there is a threshold that is below, then the professional associations should be able to address that, or the media houses. So it is important to have in-house processes that are able to deal with those kind of things, and also within or a media house that is driven by other considerations that potentially could affect society, and if then it affects or could affect society, then.
Maybe to add on that, I think this one takes us back to the research that was done by Churchill. I think he has done an elaborate recommendation on what should be done. But again, if you look at our answers, the opportunity to abuse it. So for me, I think the position should be, first, do we have the political goodwill to actually ensure the reporter who was arrested, actually he was arrested, he was just released yesterday. He received a summon, a verbal summon from a junior officer, and that brings us back to the issue of the literacy and also the awareness. Because if he just received that summon, he should have asked, can I have a written summon? Who is summoning me and why am I being summoned? The reason is that he had covered the bandit attack that happened in Marigo, and unfortunately the journalists were aware of the incident before the police. So the police was happening on TV before they were on the scene. So you see again that is abuse of office. Because if the journalist was aware of their rights, then they should have not been heeded to the summons. Maybe now that is where now the media house will have stepped in. But bringing me back again is the issue of self-regulation. If our regulations within the media house and the editorial policies are for actually jealously guide their space and be able to also call out the overreach. Thank you.
Briefly.
Yes, a quick one that there's no absence of laws. We have enforcement is the problem. For example, the issue of access to information. How have we actualized? Because information is our main access to those areas. Then they try and defend themselves. Going back to that report that Churchill reported, mentioned, there was something that was very peculiar, that was very, everybody wants to take advantage of the other. But the other two areas, that health and security, it speaks to ourselves about further training, because are we doing our economic rights? Our legal system, is the government willing to work the work and the trust? How do I do an in-depth story? Speaks to integrity again. Am I told enough? So all those things, they have an interlink with managing our own ecosystem. Know that a fact can never stand on its head. If you're right, you know what is right, you stand by that fact. And like Rose can say, the right side.
Okay, thanks. I hear as being told that there should be disclosure and sanctions. I know in the big media houses, you lose your job if you are permanent affair of fake news and all that. I'm an individual. Political parties funded by them, Kenya needs to borrow, so especially to fulfill the element of full disclosure.
I think it should with advertisers' event or advertisers' content. Also in the paper, you are supposed to disclose. But there are those that we don't disclose. And I think that is where we find ourselves in the answer. Yeah.
I think I'd like to agree with Roslyn on that point, because if you look at all the policies that exist in those newsrooms, the newsrooms have, if they don't, that's when it's content. You're going to write the story, and for an editor, that's a very tricky position to be in, because it's technically you're being told do this, which should not be done because it's against the regulation or your job is goes on the line. So sometimes just having disclosure, the owners of so yeah.
Thank you so much. I think I'm almost losing my job. So thank you, Ken. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Rosalie. And thank you, Anna. A big hand for them. I think they've been. And with that, I am officially sacked.
Thank you, Anna, on that panel. I've been carrying out what we call action research. It's like we are not concentrating on these things. That's why, Eric, people could not ask questions. I'm just walking around and everybody else is just on his or her phone. Tafadhali, nawaomba. No, you cannot tweet for the 1 hour, sure. It can't be true. Anyway, thank you so much, and I know right now tumekaa sana na tukiendelea kukaa sana si vizuri. So I want us to go for they call it a health break. I don't think. No, we are just discussion, and let's be very active. And can I nominate Mheshimiwa Paul Nabiso Nabi, our timekeeper, strictly 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Let's go for a cup of tea and coffee. Okay, 15 minutes. Sawa sawa. Nabi, naomba uwe timekeeper wetu.